Hello, everybody, and welcome to Backfired, a podcast about bad teams, bad luck, and bad decisions. My name is Lewis, and this episode is going to skew overwhelmingly toward the bad decisions category because today we are going to talk about a player that I used to really love, and I think a lot of people on the NBA subreddit circa 2014 felt the same way. That would be Ty Lawson, who played college basketball at the University of North Carolina, and most notably in the NBA for the Denver Nuggets. Well, since his time with the Nuggets, Ty has all but destroyed his own career when if he had some more self-control, he may still be in the NBA, like, for example, Drew Holiday, who was drafted one spot ahead of Lawson. Drew is still out here making a ton of money. Ty certainly was playing well enough until about 7 years ago, which was his sixth year in the league, that he probably could have carved out a nice career as either a backup point guard or a low-level starter. He is only 5'11", so maybe his shelf life would have been a little shorter. I know the shelves in his house are probably shorter than a taller NBA player's would be. Anyway, at his peak, which I'll say is 13-14 and 14-15, he averages about 16 points, 9 assists, a steal and a half. Not the most efficient player in the world by today's standards, but if you look at the adjusted shooting metrics on Basketball Reference, he's basically right at league average. I'm not saying he was a top 5 point guard in any season, but he's a good player and certainly had a shot at being a fringe all-star level guy. He's in the West in Denver, so, he's competing for starting and reserve spots against Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Steph Curry, Damian Lillard. He's not making the all-star team without, maybe one or two guards getting injured, but you can be a solid starter level player and make a bunch of money and win a bunch of games if you play your cards right, which Lawson did not do. He basically threw the deck in the trash. So yeah, let's start with his time in college because there were some signs of what was to come for Lawson when he was playing for my favorite college basketball coach ever, which is Roy Williams, Ol' Roy, as my sister and I call him. Lawson was recruited to UNC. He was a 5-star prospect, number 7 in his class, and he started off his freshman season coming off the bench for Bobby Frazier, who had started every game the year before. Well, eventually, Lawson's play, even as a freshman, playing his first college basketball games ever, was so good that it was impossible for Roy Williams to keep him out of the starting lineup for much longer. In 2 back-to-back games against number 22 Tennessee and number 3 Ohio State, the latter of which made it all the way to the national championship game that season, they had Greg Oden, Mike Conley, Mark Titus, all of those guys. Back-to-back games, wins over 2 really good teams, both in the top 25. Lawson averaged 13.5 points, 5.5 assists, and shot 57% from the floor. And you might be thinking, well, that's 2 games. Anything can happen in 2 games. And I totally get that. But then he started the next game against Kentucky, which is his 7th game of his freshman year. And, this isn't John Calipari's Kentucky. It's Tubby Smith nearing the end of his time in Lexington. Still a good team nonetheless. They did make the tournament that year. Lawson, a freshman point guard, scores 5 points and fouls out, but he had 7 assists in a win. And after that, he helped lead his team to 10 more wins in a row. He averaged 10 points, 5.5 assists, shot a great percentage from pretty much everywhere. The Tar Heels go to the Elite Eight. They lose to Georgetown in overtime. I'll say one thing that I tell people that don't really watch college basketball. It's hard for college point guards to average a ton of assists. If you don't watch or keep up with the stats, you hear 5.5 assists and you're thinking, well, for a starter, like a high major starter, that's probably not a lot. It's what a mid-tier starting point guard in the NBA or like a star forward would average. Well, in college basketball, it's not really unusual for your starting point guard to have like 3.5 or 4 assists per game. It depends on your teammates hitting shots, and college kids don't really hit shots. Lawson was talented from the jump. And, he was playing alongside Tyler Hansbrough, one of the greatest college big men ever, one of the greatest college basketball players of any position ever. So maybe some of his assists were a little easier to come by than others. But to put it in perspective, 5.5 assists per game was not that far out of the top 10 assists per game in the nation in 2007. And this past season, nobody in the ACC averaged 5.5 assists per game. 2008 is more of the same. He's great, and as a result, the Heels are on fire. They are the number 1 team in the nation until they lose to Maryland in January for their first loss of the year. They've started 18-0. Memphis, my favorite team, who I live and die for and briefly worked for, and then Tennessee, which is my alma mater. They are each number one briefly before UNC gets it back. UNC is absolutely stacked this year. There are 4 future NBA players in their starting lineup: Lawson, Hansbrough, Danny Green, get well soon, and Wayne Ellington. Lawson had missed a good chunk of the season due to a left ankle injury, but he's back in time for the NCAA tournament where the Heels make the Final Four before losing to the eventual champions, the Kansas Jayhawks. Kansas beat my 2 favorite teams, UNC and Memphis, in the span of 3 days, so that was a very hard weekend for me. Lawson declared for the NBA draft, but then he later withdrew, and then the Tar Heels bring back the same 4 NBA players, so they are stacked again. They have a ton of continuity. All these guys are upperclassmen, very similar to this upcoming season's UNC team with Caleb Love, RJ Davis, Leaky Black, and Armando Bacot coming back. That summer, Lawson is cited for drinking after driving. So I'll stand up for him a little bit here. It wasn't a DUI because he was under the legal limit. He blew a .03, but he was 20 years old. That on its face, not a huge deal. I really don't care about that. But he was pulled over for driving with his music too loud, which I also don't care about. The thing that's troubling, and that's going to come up later, is that he was driving on a suspended license. And I looked it up. He had 2 prior speeding tickets, and that led to his license being suspended. On its face, nothing too bad, just a college kid being a college kid, but it is the start of what would become a really troubling pattern. The Tar Heels open the 2009 season as heavy title favorites. They're plus 450, which is the best odds for anybody. They go through the season and are beating pretty much everyone in front of them. They do win the championship that season, and Lawson puts up 16.5 points, 6.5 assists, 2 steals per game. He's slightly hampered by a toe injury throughout the tournament, but he guts it out. My 14-year-old self, I remember, was calling him Toe Lawson. That is what passed for humor in 2009. But it's clear that he's NBA ready at this point, and he and the rest of his teammates declare for the draft again, but this time they don't withdraw, they stay in. Lawson is not considered a top 10 pick by most. He is by some, but there are concerns with his height because, again, he's only 5'11". But he's considered the best long-term prospect out of UNC's Big Four by a bunch of news sources that I found. His biggest strength is his quickness. He's incredibly fast. You think about how fast prime John Wall was. Well, there's an article from April of 2009 where they were talking about John Wall as a prospect because at the time he had not yet committed to Kentucky. And they say, well, he's fast. He's not Ty Lawson fast, but he's bigger and stronger than Lawson is. So that's, a perk in Wall's favor, which is crazy because if you think about fast NBA guys of the 2010s, Wall is probably the guy that you're thinking of, if not Russell Westbrook. Lawson had this buzzer beater against Florida State where there's 3.2 seconds left on the clock at the start of the play. For basically a dead stop, Lawson catches the inbound pass coming in from the baseline. He is at the opposing free throw line in the backcourt. He dribbles up, he weaves around a defender, and at 0.3 on the clock, he's at his own 3-point line throwing up a floater that goes in. And what's especially cool to me is that it's not like a wild shot. He's honestly putting up a really comfortable looking shot. It's probably better to watch to really get a better sense of what's going on, but his speed is just outstanding because in less than 3 seconds, he accelerates and then decelerates enough to get the shot to float up instead of just hurling it up there. So great speed, great court vision. His ankle is definitely a concern. It's the ankle that kept him out of a bunch of games in his sophomore year. But Lawson is picked right around where I think most people thought that he would go. He was drafted with the 18th pick by the Minnesota Timberwolves, Minnesota's 3rd point guard selection of the night. Notably, not a single one of them was Stephen Curry. They drafted Ricky Rubio and Johnny Flynn and then picked Lawson and flipped him to Denver for their first rounder the next year. David Kahn, general manager of the Minnesota Timberwolves, you are the freak of the week. Look, I know we have the benefit of hindsight here, but if you watched Curry play in college, come on. But also drafting the same position with 2 consecutive picks and it not being a wing is kind of silly, buddy. Now, Denver already had a point guard, and that's Chauncey Billups. And they had just traded Allen Iverson to Detroit a couple of games into the previous season, gotten Billups in return. And Billups, of course, was an all-star, played a ton of minutes. So Lawson was brought in to give Billups a chance at getting some rest. The Nuggets had just made the Western Conference Finals that year, So they defeated the New Orleans Hornets in 5 games in the first round. This series just keeps coming up, doesn't it? That's the one where the Nuggets win a game by 58. I think this is the 4th episode I've mentioned that series in. The Nuggets then beat the Mavericks in the second round, again in 5 games, and then lost to the Lakers, the eventual champions, in 6 games. And as you might expect, Billups' minutes increased as the Nuggets advanced further into the playoffs. But Billups, not having an incredibly capable backup, kind of came back to bite the Nuggets, because as the series against the Lakers progressed, you could tell that Billups was really tired. He'd averaged 35 minutes per game against the Hornets, 39.5 against the Mavs, and then finally 40.7 against the Lakers. And by game 5 and game 6, Billups was just too tired to play up to his usual level. Here's a quote from Nuggets coach George Karl. Quote, "In the playoffs, I think we might have worn Chauncey out a little bit, but everybody does that. All teams wear out their good players in the playoffs." In picking Lawson, a talented, energetic, and young point guard who showed a ton of competency in college, George Karl saw an opportunity to keep Billups under 35 minutes a game in the regular season and the postseason both. And the Nuggets felt at the time that they had a championship-level roster and that they really only needed to make moves around the margins to get over the hump that was the Lakers. Their rotation in the playoffs had been Chauncey Billups with Anthony Carter backing him up, Dante Jones with J.R. Smith coming off the bench and playing more than Jones did, of course, Carmelo Anthony, Kenyon Martin, and my guy Nene, with Chris Anderson, the Birdman, coming off the bench as well. Now, that's a great team as it is, and that's, why they made the conference finals. But the weak links were Anthony Carter and Dante Jones, so they traded for the Ty Lawson pick and then got Aaron Aflalo to supplant Dante Jones. So Lawson does his job. He earns his minutes at backup point guard over the veteran Anthony Carter. He starts a few games while Billups is out with a groin injury. That year, the Nuggets make the playoffs again, and Lawson plays enough to keep Billups' minutes down. Unfortunately, the Nuggets are unable to capture what they had the previous year, and they lose in the first round to the Utah Jazz. Well, then the next season, Lawson gets a massive opportunity. Carmelo Anthony asks for a trade from the Nuggets to the New York Knicks. This was a massive trade. The Nuggets sent Carmelo Anthony, Ronaldo Balkman, Sheldon Williams, Chauncey Billups, and Anthony Carter. So both the other point guards on the roster. And in return, they get some draft picks, Wilson Chandler, Danilo Gallinari, Timofey Mozgov, and Raymond Felton, another UNC point guard who nobody in this world looks like Raymond Felton. I could pick that guy's silhouette out of a lineup 100 times out of 100. But, this trade is pretty insane for a number of reasons. The Knicks really sacrificed a lot of their depth to trade for Carmelo instead of waiting until he became a free agent that summer and signing him, which to an extent I get. You're mitigating the risk that he goes somewhere else. He was also rumored to be going to the New Jersey Nets. But also, I maintain this Google sheet that I've posted on Reddit a couple times that tracks the chains of trades that led to each current roster spot on every team. And so as a result, I've gone through a ton of different trade family trees. And the Carmelo Anthony trade to the Knicks, Chris Paul to the Rockets, both big Kevin Garnett trades, they took me hours and hours to parse through. I mean, there's so many players involved who then got traded, and then the players that the teams got in return, they also trade. It's absolutely wild. Lawson, though, is given the keys, and he's the starting point guard of the Nuggets now full-time with both Chauncey Billups and Anthony Carter out of the picture. So from before to after the trade, his minutes jump up by 7.5 per game, up from 24 to 31.5. His efficiency gets slightly better, but it was already really good. He averages 4 more points per game, 3.2 more assists, which is almost double. So he's around 14.5 points per game and 7 assists. And the team actually stays afloat because they got so many good players back in return. So there's Lawson, Wilson Chandler, Danilo Gallinari, Kenyon Martin, and Nene. That is typically the starting lineup. The bench is J.R. Smith, Birdman, Aaron Aflalo, Raymond Felton, Kenneth Farid, is really coming on the scene here too. So, I mean, that's, a pretty good team, honestly, even if their ceiling is probably higher with a fully engaged and happy Carmelo Anthony. But they go 18-7 to finish the season with 50 wins. They lose in the first round to the Thunder. And the next season, Ty Lawson is the starter from day one. He misses a handful of games in the lockout-shortened 2012 season, but he had stayed spry during the lockout, playing for Žalgiris, Kaunas, in Lithuania. He plays very well in his third season, his first as a full-time starter. The Nuggets again make the playoffs, but lose to the Lakers in the first round in 7 games. Ty Lawson came up absolutely huge in game 6 to force a game 7, scoring a game high 32 points. He hit 5 threes. It was awesome. On April 1st of 2012, so a little before the playoffs, he's cited for careless driving, driving with a restricted license, and letting, quote, an unauthorized person drive his car. He wasn't arrested or anything. There's like no news about this basically at all. Well, then he continues playing and he's arrested on January 29th of 2013 because he, quote, avoided prosecution for that ticket that he got previously. So he either didn't go to court or didn't pay the fine. He's arrested, but he's rich, so he bonds out immediately. He plays both the day before and the day after his arrest. This season, the Nuggets are outstanding. It's the 2013 season. They win 57 games. They've traded Aaron Aflalo for Andre Iguodala. Iggy had been an all-star the year before, and he just makes this Nuggets team so much better than they had been the year before. They are point per 100 possessions better on both ends. They finished 3rd in the West, and they have home court advantage over the young, plucky Golden State Warriors, who had won 23 games out of the 66 last year. There's no way that they're ready for the limelight. Well, the Nuggets are without Danilo Gallinari, who tore his ACL with just 5 games left until the playoffs, and the Warriors win in 6 games, sending the Nuggets home in the first round for the 4th year in a row. And even with Gallinari out, the Nuggets probably should have won that series. They got a Hall of Fame coach. George Karl is one of the great assholes that the game has ever known, but he knows basketball, that's for sure. They've still got a ton of good players, and even without, their best shooter, the team is super balanced and logically is going to be better defensively without Gallinari. But Warriors coach Mark Jackson admitted that he kind of got a briefing from a Nuggets player, mostly about how the Nuggets were going to play a little rough. Here's a quote from Mark Jackson. Quote, I'm not going to do the voice, by the way. I got inside information that some people don't like that brand of basketball, and they clearly didn't co-sign it. They wanted to let me know that they have no parts in what was taking place. Let the best team win, and let everybody, with the exception of going down with a freak injury, let everybody leave out of here healthy. That's not good basketball. George Karl, who is no stranger to having conflicts with his own players, accused Andre Iguodala of feeding information to the Warriors. Tim Kawakami of the San Jose Mercury News mentioned that Iguodala had kind of been talking to Jarrett Jack a lot, who's one of the Warriors guards. Maybe that's all it was, just Iguodala saying, hey, I don't agree with us playing this physical. But it certainly did look suspicious when that offseason Iguodala declined to sign a 5-year deal in Denver and opted for a 4-year deal with the Warriors instead. This series and the lack of postseason success led to the Nuggets firing George Karl, who had won Coach of the Year that year. So that left Lawson without his Hall of Fame coach, without Danilo Gallinari or Andre Iguodala going into the next season. This is where the Nuggets kind of enter the wilderness, so to speak. Masai Ujiri leaves for Toronto. Tim Connolly, who's been in the news lately, he takes over for Masai. He hires Brian Shaw, who was an assistant coach in Indiana under Frank Vogel. Shaw had also been a Lakers assistant for a long time. He played in the NBA. I always think of him as a member of the Orlando Magic because he kind of was the catalyst for their head coach, Brian Hill, getting fired back in 1997. Although I'd say Penny Hardaway was kind of the ringleader of that operation. Anyway, Lawson has really developed into a great player, and Brian Shaw is really excited to use him in a new way. George Karl was all about pace. The Nuggets were second in pace for the last 3 years under Karl. What Shaw wanted to do was slow things down, run everything through a big man, and play defense, because come playoff time, the old adage goes, the game slows down. And if a team is more accustomed to running and gunning rather than playing in the half court, that team likely will not go far. Well, the poet Robert Burns once wrote something about the best laid plans and how they oft go awry, and that is exactly what happened. Not only were the Nuggets even faster than the year before, they were much worse defensively, and they didn't have to worry about playoff adjustments because they did not make the playoffs. They won 36 games. Lawson, though, experiences great personal success in terms of basketball in the 2013-14 season. He posts 17.6 points and 8.8 assists per game. But before the season began, he and his girlfriend both got arrested for domestic violence. All the reporting indicated that it was property destruction, not a physical altercation, thank God. Apparently, they both broke each other's phones, but this is where it starts to get really, really bad. In 2014, Ty decides, I'm an all-star. I've got great numbers. I'm putting up better stats than Tony Parker, who was one of the West's 5 all-star point guards in the past year. I can do this. I'm coming off the best year of my career. My team had a down year, but that doesn't mean I can't be an all-star. So he begins to cultivate an online personality on Reddit, both on the NBA board and the Nuggets subreddit. He makes his first post on October 1st of 2014. He's got Danilo Gallinari in the comments. He's got Timofey Mozgov in his videos, and it's, a fun time. Sadly, now the videos are deleted. He wiped his YouTube, and there are no mirrors, at least that I can find. The Reddit account is pretty clearly a ploy to get all-star votes, and he mentioned in his comments that he wanted to be an all-star, and he projects that the Nuggets are going to be a top 3 seed that season and win at least one playoff round. That does not happen, but Lawson still plays well. His assist numbers are way, way up. There's a month stretch early in the season where he's averaging 11 assists per game from November 9th to December 9th. But the Nuggets aren't winning. They've got a net rating of -3 through New Year's, which a -3 team is expected to win 33 games or so. It's around then that they start to wave the white flag on the season a little bit and decide to cut costs. They put a few guys on the trading block, and they get their first hit, which is sending Timofey Mozgov to Cleveland, and they get 2 first-round picks in return for him. So then Denver is thinking, well, if that's the market right now, if you want Ty Lawson or Kenneth Faried, that's going to cost you 2 first-rounders as well. So the Utah Jazz sniff around Lawson. Zach Lowe writes on Grantland that Utah's first-round pick plus Rodney Hood might get the job done. But then Lawson gets arrested once again, and all trade talks for him are pretty much moot. So he got arrested in late January of 2015 for a DUI and driving twice the speed limit. During that arrest, he tells the cops, "This isn't even my first DUI. I'm not talking about the ticket that he got for driving after drinking when he was at Carolina. There's this mystery DUI that nobody knows the date of, and it's not anywhere on the internet or in a newspaper that I have access to, at least." Lawson says that he also has a DUI in Missouri. So all of a sudden, come the time that he's a semi-hot asset on the trade market and, on a team-friendly contract for his level of production, a high-level starter, now the perception of him has completely changed. He's got 2 DUIs, and he's just in the news for bad reasons way too much. Now, he does stay in Denver through the trade deadline, but Zach Lowe mentions in his piece that Sacramento is a likely landing spot for Lawson in a trade. And that is because soon George Karl is going to be the head coach of the Kings. He's hired on the day before the trade deadline. And the thought of pairing Lawson with DeMarcus Cousins is great. I mean, it's fantastic. Lawson would average 12 assists with pre-injury DeMarcus Cousins. And Lawson thrived under George Karl. So Sacramento, as Lowe points out, is worth watching as a potential landing spot for Lawson, who by this point wants out. And Lawson does finish the year out in Denver, but after the end of the season, he replies to a comment on one of his Instagram posts that says, quote, "Ty, you should come to Dallas and join the team. Side with Dirk Nowitzki, Monte Ellis, and Chandler Parsons. We could use your defense and your skills." Which the defense thing is really funny because he is less than 6 feet tall and can't get through screens. But Ty responded to that comment with, "I wish." Well, then somebody else responds and says, "Man, you would actually be really great in Dallas. You would be what they wanted from Rondo. You're better than Rondo." Lawson responds, "Way better." And that is way with 6 Ys, by the way. So Lawson openly wants out of Denver and is throwing shots at Rajon Rondo as well. Denver, as it turns out, is not that into him anymore. The Nuggets have a lottery pick in the 2015 draft, and they're picking 7th overall. With that pick, they select Emmanuel Mudiay, a Congolese-American guy from Dallas. He was born in what we call the Democratic Republic of the Congo. At the time, it was Zaire. But he went to high school in Texas, spurned Larry Brown and his SMU Mustangs to play professional basketball in China for a season. When Mudiay is drafted, Ty Lawson is smoking a hookah and streaming live on, I believe it's Periscope. And, he sees the writing on the wall.
I told you. I'm going to Sacramento, bro.
But he wouldn't go to Sacramento just yet. But you know who would? Rajon Rondo. And you know who averaged almost 12 assists per game alongside DeMarcus Cousins? Rajon Rondo. So Rondo got to go to Sacramento while Ty Lawson got to go to rehab. He got a 3rd DUI in Los Angeles on July 14th. So yes, a third DUI in the span of probably about a year, depending on when the one in Missouri was. He is told that he may have to wear an ankle bracelet or use like a home breath monitor. Part of his bond is that he's not allowed to drink alcohol for a time. Lawson does go to rehab for a month. A CBS Sports article by Matt Moore, aka Hardwood Paroxysm, has some quotes from Lawson that are, just kind of still in denial that he has an issue. He said he learned what triggers are, what may cause somebody to drink, then says that he doesn't feel like he needed to go to rehab. All of his issues stem from being caught drinking and driving, so he just stopped driving. I guess that's one way to go about it. But after that, the Nuggets had their point guard of the future, or so they thought, and it was time for them to move on from Lawson. And there are a number of things that Lawson did in Denver to kind of sow discontent. Chris Dempsey of the Denver Post listed a few of them out in an article. He missed a team meeting in 2014, which led to him being benched. He skipped a practice after the All-Star break because he was still just hanging out in Las Vegas. He skipped a shoot-around in 2015. He was the de facto leader of a team that kind of just stopped caring, and that led to Brian Shaw getting fired. The Nuggets fired Shaw after losing 20 out of 22 games. And after a game where the Nuggets lost to the Grizzlies 99-69, Shaw said to the media, quote, "I'd have more respect if guys just told me they didn't feel like playing tonight from the start." Months after his firing, Lawson mocked Shaw by posting a video of him rapping a pregame speech. So after all that, if publicly wishing to be on another team wasn't the final straw for the Nuggets, it was the number of arrests. So it was time for him to go. Lawson was traded to the Houston Rockets for a first-round pick, which wound up being number 15 in the 2016 draft, Juancho Hernangomez, as well as a few different players. Daryl Morey, the Rockets GM, said that it was low risk, high reward. Quote, "When you're trying to be the best team out of 30, you've got to take risks all over the place." Through our conversations with him, we felt confident that he's getting the help that he needs. Well, the risk didn't exactly pay off. Lawson posted career low metrics in basically everything. He wasn't a starter, so you may be thinking, of course, he's playing fewer minutes. Of course, his counting stats are worse. But what I mean is that his per 36 stats are worse. His advanced stats are worse. Career low shooting splits, net rating, assist rate, all that jazz. He's just not the same guy anymore. So after he is suspended twice for a total of 5 games, one suspension for his January arrest and the other for his July one, the Rockets waive him and he moves on to the Indiana Pacers where he's just a bench warmer. He finally gets the chance to go to Sacramento in the wild summer of 2016. He did not get to cash in like his former Nuggets teammate Timofey Mozgov did, but he finally got to play in Sacramento with DeMarcus Cousins as was destined. George Karl had been fired and replaced by Dave Yeager, but Lawson would be reunited with some former teammates like Aaron Aflalo and Costa Koufos. So, maybe this would be the year that Sacramento would get back to the playoffs. It has to happen sometime. But it wasn't this time, and at the trade deadline, Cousins is unexpectedly traded to the New Orleans Pelicans, pairing him with Anthony Davis. And famously, I couldn't talk about Ty Lawson without mentioning this. Cousins getting out of town seemingly left him with no one to ask for taco recommendations, so he outsourced to his Snapchat following, black screen, purple text, quote, "Where's a bum Taco Tuesday spot in Sacramento?" So he gathers his suggestions, he goes somewhere, he posts a pic, and then the next day, he was listed as questionable due to gastroenteritis, aka the stomach flu. Now, I don't want to ruin the magic here, but Lawson did actually play in the next game against the Nets. He did not miss the game, as the legend goes. But this season was just kind of Lawson toiling away in anonymity for basically the rest of his time in the NBA. In his final regular season game, Lawson recorded his first and last ever triple-double. It was the only time he ever got to 10 rebounds in a game. 5'11" guys tend to have a hard time rebounding, of course. And then in April of 2017, it was over. After that, Lawson signed a contract to play in the CBA, the Chinese Basketball Association, with the Shandong Golden Stars. The club is in Jinan, which is inland, but the province of Shandong is south of Beijing. It juts out to the east into the Yellow Sea, kind of toward the Korean Peninsula. Lawson was the leading scorer and assist man. He played alongside Donatas Motiejunas, who was part of a failed trade. Go back to episode 2 of the show to hear about the end to Demo's time in the NBA. Lawson also played with Ding Yanyiang, who very nearly got to play for the Dallas Mavericks. Ding was the domestic MVP of the Chinese Basketball Association in 2017 and 2018 both. So, Lawson is seemingly on a pretty stacked team. I don't follow Chinese basketball, but, I feel like a good rule of thumb is if I recognize three guys who are on the same team, then it's probably a good sign for them. Now, I mentioned that Lawson got a triple-double in the final regular season game of his career, but that game wasn't the final game of his NBA career. After his CBA team's season ended, Lawson signed with the Washington Wizards for the playoffs and played in 5 out of 6 playoff games. He had a 14-point, 8-assist debut in game 2, but the Wizards lost to the Raptors in the first round, thus officially ending Lawson's NBA career. After that, he returned to Shandong for another season and then signed with the Fujian Sturgeons the following season. Fujian is in the south of China. Off of Fujian's shore is Taiwan. He played 1 year there alongside the likes of Amari Stoudemire and my old friend, the 57th pick in the 2016 NBA draft, selected by the Memphis Grizzlies, Wang Jaelin. I was so excited in 2016 to watch the Olympics because I thought that Wang Jaelin was going to be a Memphis Grizzly. He then averaged 4 points per game in the Olympics. Ty Lawson was then banned from the CBA in 2020 for posting onto his Instagram story, quote, "Chinese women got cakes on the low," followed by a picture of him getting a lap dance from a Chinese woman. So yeah, that earned him a lifetime ban from the CBA. He then played 1 game in 2021 for Kolossos, which is a Greek club in Rhodes. Rhodes is in the Dodecanese, an archipelago in southeastern Greece, very close to Turkey. And by the way, the reason that I'm very specific about the location of some of these non-US cities is kind of for my own amusement, and partially because if I say the location out loud and have it be part of content that I'm creating, it helps me learn it. I'm also trying not to be like the dumb American who doesn't know geography outside of North America. So please bear with me when I describe the location of a foreign city in extreme detail. Lawson then went on in 2021 and 2022 to play in Monastir, Tunisia, which is across the Mediterranean Sea from Italy, bordered to the west by Algeria. If anyone's a fan of Albert Camus, you probably know where Algeria is. What's interesting is that US Monastir is in the BAL, which is the Basketball Africa League, the NBA-funded sort of almost Champions League. This is, of course, the league where J. Cole played for a team in Rwanda. Lawson was the first former NBA player to play in the BAL. Lawson's team did win the BAL championship about a week and a half ago, May 28th, but Lawson was not on the team. Leonard Solms of ESPN Africa wrote that Lawson left the team, quote, acrimoniously before the tournament began. Lawson was arrested once again. Before he was arrested, reportedly he was told to put on a mask in the Madrid airport, threatened to punch someone over that, and was forced to miss his flight to Santo Domingo, which is in the Dominican Republic after that. So he left the airport, went to an Italian restaurant where he threw a glass at somebody who then needed stitches, and then got into a fight out in the street later that night and was arrested. And now he might be playing in Taiwan, but I couldn't totally verify that. There was an article saying that he'd signed there, but I can't find any other evidence of that. But yeah, his behavior in the last few years is really troubling. I hope he gets the help that he needs. He definitely deserves that. Through whatever issues it is that he has, he's living, what seems from the outside to still be a pretty good life, playing all over the world for good money. But unfortunately, Ty Lawson has kind of alienated the fan base that you'd think would support him through thick and thin, which is the Carolina fans. He and Roy Williams apparently had a falling out at some point. He posted on his Instagram story in 2020 that he, quote, doesn't fuck with Carolina or support anything they do. It's a blessing he doesn't open his mouth. Roy Williams knows why. Then when Roy retired in 2021, Lawson had another Instagram story where he congratulated him, said he loved him, and said he would come to see him once he got back from China. It's just sad to see someone push away the people who are going to be there for them. I and my family personally have received a major act of kindness from Roy Williams, so I'm not sure what was going on between him and Lawson, but in my book, Roy is just a kind old man. But, it may just be that Lawson, like I said, has some major issues that he needs help with. That's certainly what the evidence shows to me, and I'm glad that he and Roy Williams have seemingly buried whatever hatchet there was. But I just hope he's thriving wherever he is, whatever he's doing, whether he's in Taiwan or wherever. I definitely wish him the best. The last I had seen, he went undrafted in the Big 3 draft, so that is certainly a new low for him. But in his NBA career, he earned about $43.5 million, but was arrested a total of 5 times. And the progression from driving on a suspended license to avoiding prosecution to all of a sudden domestic violence and then 3 DUIs in short order. You got to think that at some point, somebody who cared about him should have stepped in Maybe they did and he just wasn't willing to change. But all of this unfolding before the cap spike in 2016 means that at minimum, he cost himself dozens of millions of dollars. And now he's just a cautionary tale. He had it all and now he's a footnote. His story is still unfolding. It's been action packed from the jump, but his time in the NBA is certainly over, you'd have to assume. As is this episode. So thank you for listening. I appreciate it greatly. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned some world geography. I know I did researching this, and we'll talk next week. Have a good one.